Hi, welcome to the bathtub, where when you hear this brand new theme effect,
You rang me, Lord.
and then Lucky says she wants to come in here. This has been a madhouse today at the bathtub. That's our new theme song, You Rang My Lord. And this is Lucky's butt. That's Lucky's butt. And she's come up here to say, I don't know, she doesn't like to come see us anymore, but now suddenly she wants to be here because I took Dodo out of the room. So before I get on to the stupid show, I filmed this 10 times now. And Dodo, every time that she heard that ringing bell from the You Rang My Lord show, she'd just go apeshit. She just wouldn't stop. She was so loud, I literally couldn't hear myself. And I was actually going, I almost strangled her. And then this Lucky never comes in here. And so finally, after the 7th or 8th time, I pushed her down the hall and put her in the other room because she just was so noisy. And I think that's Lucky's scared of Dodo, so she never comes in here anymore hardly when I'm doing these videotapes. And now suddenly she shows up. So it's hot, we're tired, and Dodo's been put we've been ostracized, poor old Dodo. She has to hide in the other room for a little bit. But I put her in front of the big picture mirror, so she should be okay. Anyway, this is a long way of saying we have a brand new theme show. We don't deliver much here at the bathtub. What we do deliver is always half-assed, but we deliver a lot of theme shows, and we really try to come up with a lot of different theme shows. As I get older, one of the things I've been doing is in my bathtub readings is reading books, favorite writers in sequence. For example, we've been reading the Maigret series in sequence for many years. Been reading the Rex Stout, Nero Wolfe books in sequence for many years. We're reading some books backwards, like the Ross MacDonald, Lou Archer novels, and Brian Moore and William Trevor's novels. And every once in a while I'll do a bathtub episode. And the whole premise between these is that I don't remember which books I've read and which I haven't, especially with series fiction. And this way I'm rereading the ones I did enjoy in the past, and I'm reading the ones I've missed because I never know which I've missed. Lucky, why are you settling here? You're so weird. So today we're going to start a new sequence of reading because I figured that if I have a lot of sequences, I actually now have to outlast. I have to live longer than the imminent demise of the human race. That's basically we're burning the whole place down, and in order to make Exxon wealthy, and I'm going to have to outlive everybody in order to finish reading all these books. The new series I want to read in sequence is the P.G. Wodehouse Jeeves books. Okay, and that's what I talk a little bit about today because I started going back to reading these. Now, Lucky, why don't you get down? You're being very good, and it's nice to see you in the bathtub. But I need to talk a little bit. So for many years, I like Wodehouse, but I think it's pronounced Woodhouse, by the way. I like him, but I've only really liked the Jeeves books, the Jeeves and Bertie Wooster books. And pretty much since I can remember, 30 years or more, 40 years, I've had basically these Jeeves books. Okay, I've had My Man Jeeves, Very Good Jeeves, The Inimitable Jeeves, The Code of the Woosters, Right Ho Jeeves, and Carry On Jeeves. And whenever I want to read one of these books, and I often want to because they're hilarious, I pick up one of these and I think, I don't think I read this one, and of course I've read it. I've read some of these books 2 or 3 times, and I never had it turns out there's a lot more Jeeves books. There's like another dozen books. So I went around, I started picking up a lot of Jeeves books. I put them up on the shelves up there, and I'm trying to fill in all the gaps I have and start from the beginning because it is very confusing publication history for the Jeeves books. Now, the first book I guess published in the Jeeves series, this is a hard book to find, by the way, but I've had it floating around for a long time. Let me see if I got the date right. It was first published in 1919. And it was called My Man Jeeves. Okay? And I just went back. I decided I was going to read from the beginnings of the series, the first book published. And I read this, and I kept thinking, I've read all these stories before. I sure have. And then it turns out that this first volume, so I actually looked up the bibliography for these stories. This one has 4 Jeeves stories. 4 great Jeeves stories, by the way. They're hilarious. And then 4 more stories with a guy, I forget his name. I think his name's Reggie Sparkle or something like that. And those stories are not as good. I forget his name. Those stories are not as good, but many people consider him kind of an early version of Bertie Wooster. Okay, so I was reading this a few weeks ago. You can get this free online, by the way. There's a free Kindle version of this book. and I was reading it. Those stories, the first three stories are Jeeves stories. They're hilarious, three of the best ones. And then I hit these Reggie Sparkler or Reggie what's his face stories, and I didn't really like. I don't find those that interesting. So a lot of Woodhouse books don't quite hit me as good as the Jeeves books do. So anyway, I read that, and then I read the second one of the series. So I actually went down. I went to one of those websites to find out what's the sequence. And the second one is another book I read called The Inimitable Jeeves. Now this is considered the second one of the series, but it's a little confusing. Now this is the most of the great Jeeves stuff is long stories. They're about 15, 20-page stories, a kind of perfect beginning, middle, and end story. And this one is kind of a bunch of stories that have been kind of sewn together. They're all stories about a weird guy named Bingo Little, who's a friend of Bertie, who's constantly falling in love with like waitresses and dance hall girls and people's cousins and stuff like that. And he falls in love just instantaneously, and it always leads to disaster. And he's always asking Bertie and Jeeves to help him. And they kind of tied it together into a novel, and it's pretty good, but it's probably my least favorite of the Jeeves books, and that's number 2. Now we get into the sort of interesting stuff, which is Carry On Jeeves, which is considered the third book in the series. I'm describing this really boring bibliography for a reason, so bear with me. Carry On Jeeves has the 4 stories from My Man Jeeves in it, with slight alterations, and then like another 5 or 6 stories. This is the best of the first 3 books by far. It also has a story called Jeeves Takes Charge. Now this book comes out in 1925, when the kind of the chemistry between Bertie and Jeeves is really working, and Woodhouse could write these stories in his sleep, and he writes the first time they meet, when Jeeves shows up to take over Bertie's house, and Bertie almost fires him at one time, and then he changes his mind. And if I was to recommend a book to start with, I would recommend that you start with Carry On Jeeves. You don't need My Man Jeeves. You just don't need it. You can get it on Kindle for free if you want to try it out. Get this first, and then get The Inimitable Jeeves. It's quite good. They're good, but nowhere near as good as this. And save this for like near the end when you're all finished, because it's good, but it's not as good as Carry On Jeeves. And it feels like the series really starts to get moving about this point. So anyway, I've almost finished Carry On Jeeves. I love the Bertie Wooster Jeeves stories. I want to read every single one of them, and they do seem to be getting better. Now, they're mainly short stories, but I have to say that one of the novels I've read a couple of times is called The Code of the Woosters, and this is a fucking brilliant, an effing brilliant comic novel, and plot-wise, it's just incredible, brilliantly put together little story, and then just hilarious. Now, for those of you who haven't read Jeeves, and I can sort of understand that, here's our martini. We should have a chilled martini when we talk about Bertie and Jeeves. Is that the whole premise is that Bertie is basically an idiot. He's a twit. He's just a rich, spoiled English boy. And he's got a whole rich family, and everybody's got a lot of money, and he hangs around with all these rich people, and they're all kind of idiots. And Jeeves basically saves him, gets him out of trouble over and over again. And that's it. That's the entirety of the plots. Now, I wanted to read a couple passages just to give you a flavor of some of these stories. But the main flavor is how these two guys work together. In fact, I really should probably start with this. This is the beginning of The Inimitable Jeeves. And it'll give you a little flavor of how they talk. Basically, Bertie just makes an idiot of himself constantly, and Jeeves is always kind of being evasive, but he knows everything that's going on. He just knows everything, and he's kind of efficient at everything, and he usually is helping Bertie long before Bertie even knows he needs to be helped. Here's just a typical opening exchange. This is the first chapter of The Inimitable Jeeves. Jeeves exerts the old cerebellum. "Morning, Jeeves," I said. "Good morning, sir," said Jeeves. He put the good old cup of tea softly on the table by my bed, and I took a refreshing sip, just right as usual, not too hot, not too sweet, not too weak, not too strong, not too much milk, and not a drop spilled in the saucer. A most amazing cove, Jeeves. So dashed competent in every respect. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I mean to say, take just one small instance. Every other valet I've ever had used to barge into my room in the morning while I was still asleep, causing much misery. But Jeeves seems to know when I'm awake by a sort of telepathy. He always floats in with a cup exactly 2 minutes after I come to life. Makes a deuce of a lot of difference to a fellow's day. How's the weather, Jeeves? Exceptionally clement, sir. Anything in the papers? Some slight friction threatening in the Balkans, sir. Otherwise, nothing. I say, Jeeves, a man I met at the club last night told me to put my shirt on privateer for the 2 o'clock race this afternoon. How about it? I should not advocate it, sir. The stable is not sanguine. That was enough for me. Jeeves knows. How, I couldn't say, but he knows. There was a time when I would laugh lightly and go ahead and lose my little all against his advice, but not now. Talking of shirts, I said, have those mauve ones I ordered arrived yet? Yes, sir. I sent them back. Sent them back? Yes, sir. They would not have become you. Whenever Jeeves doesn't like Bertie's clothes, he either throws it away or gives it to somebody. And sometimes when Bertie gets really stroppy, like he tries to grow a mustache in one story, that Jeeves won't help him solve his horrible problems. He'll and eventually he has to cut the mustache off just to make Jeeves happy. I want to read a couple. There's so many funny passages. I just read one more. And there's always these aunts and uncles who are always coming into Bertie's life. Basically, he's just a bachelor who likes to sleep late and go out drinking late and just sit around the house, not do anything, not having responsibilities. He doesn't seem to do anything for a living. And these aunts are always barging into his life, and friends of his aunts, and they always want him to do things. And there's one hilarious story called Jeeves and the Unbidden Guest. It's in both this and the Carry On Jeeves volume. And this is a good picture, the way he describes some of these women that come into his life. And this woman has a son who she says he's a teetotaler and he's a Christian and he doesn't do anything. And he's a super good kid. And she leaves him with Bertie. And of course, from the moment she leaves him with Bertie, this kid is all over town getting drunk, chasing women. It's one of the funniest stories that Wood has ever wrote. But this is the first time Bertie describes Lady Malvern. Lady Malvern was a hearty, happy, healthy, overpowering sort of dashed female. Not so very tall, but making up for it by measuring about 6 feet from the OP to the prompt side. She fitted into my biggest armchair as if it had been built around her by someone who knew they were wearing armchairs tight about the hips that season. She had bright, bulging eyes and a lot of yellow hair, and when she spoke, she showed about 57 front teeth. She was one of those women who kind of numb a fellow's faculties. She made me feel as if I were 10 years old and had been brought into the drawing room in my Sunday clothes to say, "How do you do?" Altogether, by no means the sort of thing a chappie would wish to find in the sitting room before breakfast. The great Jeeves stories are just paragraph. They're hilarious. Sentence by sentence, they're hilarious. And is Lucky over there? She's probably eating the birdseed. This is the Mutual of Omaha of literary talk shows. Lucky, you better not be eat the birdseed. This is her favorite thing. Okay, this has been a mad episode. I'm going to try to do a couple more if I can control the troops. And I would really recommend reading these. And you could basically read any of them. I think they all read well, and you don't have to pick them up. But if you want to do what I've been doing and read them sort of in sequence and then eventually read them all, the best start to me is Carry On Jeeves, just because it has the first time they meet, the first time he hires Jeeves. And the stories are some of the best stories. And it contains all the Jeeves stories from the first published volume. And you could go on from there. And I want to read through the whole series and talk briefly about them as we go. Okay? Happy bathing. Bye.